You are watching or listening to episode 85 of the Unnecessary Nonsense podcast, where every day is Casual Friday. I'm Carlos, that's Dave.
Woohoo! Casual Friday!
Every day is Casual Friday. Every day. Now, on today's show, we're going to talk about another irrelevant division in Major League Baseball. Dave will remind us which one it is because I already forgot. And then but all I can say is, even though I've forgotten it, I'll make fun of Mike Trout. Now, in a related note, I'm going to make fun of Mike Trout for every division, just for consistency, whether he's in it or not. Just so we're clear. You can look forward to that. I'll educate Dave a little bit on the demise of WCW. And in addition to that, we'll find some other sports-related topic to talk about. Probably QB Carousel, maybe something else. I'll probably make something up. And more than likely, I'll just talk about the latest YouTube rabbit hole I went down. That and more on this episode of the Unnecessary Nonsense Podcast. I already said who we are. Let's get to the thing. Dave, what happened this week?
So, interestingly enough, for whatever reason, I'm not 100% sure on the why now, but my mother-in-law has decided to get rid of a bunch of stuff, and she's trying to sell like random things she has in the house. And so today, she was like, "Here's a box of cards. Tell me if there's anything of here of value," which is like sweet. Because it's kind of like opening junk wax, except without the opening part, right? Like you don't know what you're going through, right? And so it's mostly a collection of early '90s hockey cards that was in this box, all right? And I would say the best thing that came out of it was an Upper Deck Martin Brodeur rookie card.
Amazing. That doesn't exist.
There's
no such thing as an Upper Deck Martin Brodeur rookie card.
Well, then what is it?
There is early Martin Brodeur cards, but his only rookie card is from Score.
Okay, interesting. Because it says rookie. I mean, it says rookie. So just because it says rookie and it's whatever, it's whatever.
Are you shocked that manufacturers lie?
No, not. But
it probably says star rookie, something like that.
Maybe I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't remember now. But
keep telling your story, and I'll pull up the card in question.
But on looking at it though, depending on you could get it has decent value. Even ungraded compared to whatever else is in the box. There's also a Mike Richter maybe rookie card. Does he have an O-Pee-Chee rookie card, Carlos?
Mike Richter, I'm pretty sure yes.
Okay, so then I think that one is an actual rookie as well. Those are the best two out of the box. And then there's a whole bunch of random Mike Modanos too, which was interesting. Just because I know you're a super collector, so I was like, hey, look at all this Mike Modano that Carlos probably already has, but and isn't really worth anything, but it's Mike Modano.
Yeah, no, it's the way it goes down. It's all good.
So that was just kind of interesting to kind of go through that stuff, and also is the random value of things as we talk about things. Did you know that apparently if you have the original Xbox, nope, not that. Maybe that one.
Well, this is the Martin Brodeur.
What year is that?
This is 92-93.
Okay, it must be that one then.
Yeah. So the 92-93 Martin Brodeur, so his rookie card is from 90-91.
Okay. So good to know. Anyway, but that card has some decent value to it anyway. Compared to, like another card that has like a buck or less, right?
Sure.
Well, that's based on what I looked up anyway. And then also I found out that if you're going back to the original Xbox, if you have one that's like the clear one versus the solid black one, the clear one is for some reason unknowns to me worth more, or at least sells for more. I don't really know why. It was
produced in lesser quantities. You're talking about like the see-through like colorless one?
Yeah,
like the one I have in my house.
I guess so. I don't know, right? Yeah, but yeah. Anyway, I'm in the process of eventually trying to sell that one as well.
Yeah.
And some random games, which was kind of like took me down some memory lane, which is kind of cool. Gotta love the nostalgia kick. And otherwise, it's been a normal week. I went skiing 3 times this week and actually broke my ski poles. Who knew that when it gets really hot or hotter compared to what it's been, and then you almost get like a flash freeze. That you can fall easier because you're basically skiing on sheer ice, and broke my ski poles. So got to get some new ones of those. Luckily, the skis are intact and I am intact, although slightly bruised. All right. Yeah, he looks very young.
Yep. But that one, so for those of you who have the benefit of video, what I'm showing Dave is the Martin Brodeur rookie card. There are 2 versions. There's the Canadian and American version. They're distinguished by the language on the back, but also the fact that this score here is red in one version and blue in the other. But outside of that, that's what Martin Brodeur looks like. It's a little bit questionable as far as it is. He's basically in a suit, putting on a jersey, taking basically a draft day photo. If it looks like he's taking a draft day photo with a New Jersey Devils jersey, and it looks like it's almost like a graduation picture, that's the Martin Brodeur rookie card.
Good to know.
For whatever reason, that year he only had the one in score. I don't know why. It was interesting because they did have an Upper Deck set that year, and they also had an O-Pee-Chee Premier set that year. And I can only imagine that the Brodeur would have been very popular had he been in either one of those sets, because they are the two more notable ones of that year.
Interesting. Anyway, that's sort of how the week's been. So, Carlos, how about you, man?
So week-wise, nothing too crazy. There was a couple of interesting things, but I'm going to leave that to the side. I already talked to Dave a little bit about that offline. I think there'll be a story to come, but I want to wait until there's something more definitive to say, either positive or negative. So we'll kind of see how that plays out. But I did have a little bit of fun going down a YouTube rabbit hole this past week, which is fun.
YouTube rabbit holes are always good.
Yes. So I was feeling a little nostalgic. I don't remember exactly what triggered it, in the sense that I saw something or caught something somewhere that reminded me and sent me down a bit of a rabbit hole. Actually, I know what it was. In doing my research for my sports card stuff, I've been keeping an eye on auctioneer Ken Golden, who has made headlines recently for selling an equity stake in his auction house that has been responsible for some of the record sales in sports cards. The reason that's important is that as part of that, he's been on a full-out media blitz. So he's been out there, getting his face out there and doing all kinds of stuff. But one of the things he did was he had a live thing where he was explaining a little bit of the context behind the equity sale. He's still the primary shareholder. He doesn't have a controlling interest anymore, I don't believe, because they're going to appoint a new CEO. So from a hobby perspective, it's relevant because it means that some equity money has been brought in. But part of the ownership group that bought it included a bunch of known names and celebrities, including one of the co-founders of YouTube, including, various people. Kevin Durant, Deshaun Watson, Timbaland.
All right, so some big names.
Mark Wahlberg. Yeah, and Mark Cuban.
Okay,
well. Yeah, so some fairly big names. But for them, relatively speaking, the investment was $40 million into the business, which for them is relatively small potatoes. But for a sports card related business, it's pretty big money, especially for one round of investment. But the reason why I got brought down the nostalgia kick is that when he did his Instagram live, because he's become notorious for his Instagram lives now, where he holds court on people and talks about the hobby. He invites occasionally, though, some of his celebrity friends spontaneously come by. He's had Gary Vee on there and a couple other folks. But for that particular one of the buyers of one of the Michael Jordan rookies that he had sold or auctioned off was actually Timbaland. So he had Timbaland on the screen. But I think when I saw Timbaland there, and I think that was a specific thing that caused it, it sent me down this little rabbit hole where I was like, I remember Timbaland. Because I remember the time where Timbaland was like in every music video. It's like in Dave's home videos and his family, Timbaland was there. He was just in the background going, And that's literally all he did for a bunch of videos. Now, he did sing from time to time, if you want to call it singing, but, he was doing something. The point is he was producing. So it set me down like a Timbaland early to mid 2000s rabbit hole. Nice. And I was just laughing and I was like, okay. Some particular favorites were his various collaborations with Nelly Furtado, of course. Mm-hmm. And then, just
was it Promiscuous or Promiscuous Girl?
That was the big one. Promiscuous was the big one. The whole Loose album, Timbaland produced, I believe. So he was involved in a lot of that, even where he wasn't on screen, he was producing the thing, and that was her biggest album by far. But she also did a lot of collaborations. And then Timbaland around that time also had his own album, which was I think called Shock Value, if memory serves me. That's what I say. It was a whole rabbit hole that kind of took me down. It's been almost 20 years, 15 years or 20 years.
So how much of this rabbit hole while you were doing it did you get the feeling that, man, I'm old?
Oh, like as soon as I looked at the dates on it, I was like, fuck. This sucks. This sucks, bro. It all sucks. Everything sucks. But I was enjoying it. It was fun.
Yeah, it's true.
But,
it's at one point you're like, I'm old, but I don't care because I enjoy this.
Here's the thing. I would sit there listening to this all the time, but I'm like, these songs are pretty good. They hold up. I'll be honest. A lot of them do hold up.
Nice.
Let me take a sip of this though, and I'll pick one. Let me pick a few of my favorites. I want to give you a couple of favorites. So give me a second.
Fair enough.
So it was a combination of fuck and at the same time, it's good.
Yeah,
okay,
I feel that's so much of life right now.
Correct.
To be fair.
Yes. Yes, yes. So one of my favorites. So from Shock Value, you had a lot of different songs that got in there. You had the one with Carrie Hilson. It was the way I are, which is grammatically glorious, but a good song. Like if you go back and listen to a song, it actually holds up quite nicely. It's a very good song if you like kind of like dancey music, or
Hmm.
even if you just want to have it. You could have it on a workout playlist. I think that would work really well on a workout playlist. To be honest
Nice.
with you. And I find that a lot of the Timbaland songs from this time period would probably qualify for that if you wanted to do that. The other one though that made me laugh because the thing with a lot of these is the music video is the thing. Part of the reason that went down a nostalgic kick with YouTube is that you can watch the video because at the
Yeah.
time they still made music videos for these things. So that's kind of what added to it. You'd have that added element to it. So even like the Promiscuous song did very well, but the video helped work with the song to make it all work because Justin Timberlake had a cameo in it, and you would have no idea if you didn't watch the video where he's
Yeah,
literally
for
dancing
sure.
like a moron in the middle of the screen.
But
So
that's part of what makes it entertaining.
correct. So you've got all that. So and I'll take a moment as well just to explain how that rabbit hole led down down a little bit more of a rabbit hole as well. But specifically for the Timbaland piece, I went to looking a couple of them. There was a song there with that One Republic featured in. I think it's called "Apologize," and that was a
Okay.
Timbaland song on there, which is a good song as well. I would say not workout playlist worthy, but still a good song. The one though that made me laugh, um, it was I'm just trying to remember what the name was. It was a music video that was with Timbaland on his album, but it was featuring a musician called So Shy. Now, does that name ring a bell at all?
No,
Probably
not at
not.
all.
Yeah, so that's okay. I'll fill in. I'll fill in the. It's called Morning After Dark. So that's what it was. Morning After Dark. So if you find it, Nelly Furtado did feature in it briefly. I think she was kind of a throw-in though. I don't think she was actually part of the video because they like have a clip. So let me explain the concept of the video because the video is the key here. So basically, the video starts off with this lady walking down the street, and Timbaland is kind of on the other side of the street. But the thing is, if you're watching the video, now I've seen the video obviously years ago, but if you follow the video and you're watching it, it looks like Timbaland's basically creeping on her, just kind of like hanging around, but he's singing and moving at the same
Hmm.
time that she's walking on the other side of the street. But what it turns out the story is that for whatever reason, this lady is being stalked by vampires. Why? I don't know. What the context
Because
is, no idea.
reasons,
Yes,
right?
because reasons, correct. So she's being stalked by vampires. But it turns out that Timbaland is part of this elite squad of people that are stopping the vampires from getting to her somehow. So what happens is, as one of the vampires is about to like sneak up and get close behind her, then Timbaland just kind of like darts out in front and like stares him down, and then he's like, oh crap, it's Timbaland. He's like, I think he's gonna at me. So he basically stops dead in his tracks, and then he basically disappears. And then there's another scene that goes after where basically a black cat goes behind a phone booth and becomes an Asian man in a suit. Obviously. So what happens is the Asian man in a suit follows the lady into the bus, but So Shy is there. So this is her opportunity to do some rapping along with her singing. So she does her rapping and singing. And then what happens is she is on the bus watching him, watching her. And then during the course of this piece, then she starts to get off the bus and he's about to follow her out of the bus. But even though Soshai was directly behind the lady getting out of the bus, when the Asian guy, who is actually a black cat slash vampire slash something, so when he's going to go attack her or follow her or whatever, Soshai is already outside the bus because reasons. Okay.
I
So
like
I'm
it.
almost. So then she goes to the club with her friends where another one is going to go in. And at some point, like vampires start attacking people and then she like leaves. And then they basically are singing and dancing on the side morning after dark.
Beautiful.
It's,
Beautiful.
it, wow. Chef's kiss. So good. And I was just sitting there watching
Now,
like,
in true fashion, I'm guessing. I just want to double check and make sure, in case anybody missed it. The story you've just told us, the lyrics have nothing to do with that, right?
well, it references morning after dark.
Okay,
So there is I guess you can I guess if you took the lyrics and like broke it down, like there's pieces of it that allude to something.
so it's not beyond the realm of possibility that you could look at the lyrics and go, yeah, this song's about vampires.
I think there's clips in there. I could totally I could make a case that it's probably closer than a lot of Timbaland's videos
Yeah,
where the
correct.
visuals.
So it's not explicitly about vampires, but you can read between the lines and maybe get there.
I think there's some knowledge, some analogy is the wrong word I'm not looking for. There is some symbolism, and there's probably some verbiage there that is playing into it. Although, but my favorite thing in traditional Timbaland fashion is that basically, and if you watch Timbaland videos from this time period, basically it's what ridiculous face can Timbaland make? But the funny part is like towards the tail end there, like if you watch the video, Timbaland like has this weird thing where he like switches contacts. So he has this weird contacts with his eyes. So I'm like, so are you the bad guys or are they the bad guys? It's like, I'm still unclear. And I'm still unclear why you're protecting her or not protecting her or funneling her into a thing so you can attack her. Like, I don't actually understand what the context is of this. All I understand is that Soshai is there with you. She's got Soshai tattooed on her arm. She's got a bunch of tattoos. And she's got a beret because I think she's French. These are the important questions that we have yet to solve to this day, Dave. But I want you to think about the fact that my description of this music video was a little bit more elaborated, a little bit more involved than your broken ski pole story.
That's true. I could have told you more about the broken ski story, but I figured
I really don't think I really don't think anyone would care.
Exactly.
So that was the first part of the rabbit hole, was following some of these Timbaland videos. But in the course of that, you also, YouTube being an algorithm, you get videos from around the same time period. So it led me down a little mini, so I watched some reaction videos to it, but it also led me down a little bit of a rabbit hole, checking out some of the new metal era Limp Bizkit, Fred Durst stuff.
Okay.
Now, here's the thing. Some of that actually holds up. The guy gets a lot of hate because Fred Durst is a bit of a douchebag. But the music, not terrible. Not terrible, Dave. Not terrible.
Sure.
Video's ridiculous. Completely, utterly, like, you want to talk about ridiculous. But I had completely forgotten. It completely slipped my mind that one of the videos is actually like a prequel to another one of the videos. They literally made two videos that were like playing off of each other. And the name escapes me of which one was the one that I saw. And the first video, basically he and his band get executed for inciting a riot. That's the story. And then after they die at the end of the video, they're basically in a white space, floating in space. And one of the guys is like, "Are we in heaven?" And then he's like, "If I was in heaven, I'd be kicking it with Method Man right now." And then he like slips down underneath. And then that leads into the music video with Method Man.
Nice.
In which at one point, all I'll say about that video, I haven't watched it again yet, but I remember the video. I know what the video is, if I can remember the name of it. I know for a fact at one point they like fight ninja style, and I think one of them grabs a katana and starts like swinging it at the other, and they basically play fight through the whole music video.
Nice. Gotta love those.
The early 2000s, Dave. The late 90s, early 2000s.
Late 90s videos.
Goddamn, man. Goddamn. So yeah, so there was that. I enjoyed that with the videos, and then
once you go down the rabbit hole, like who knows how long you're gonna be there.
It was so good. Here's the problem. I'll be honest with you. I can't think of an exception in the little run that I had there. There wasn't a bad song among them. They're not songs I'm going to throw on the playlist myself right now. But I was like, I don't feel like I wasted my time here.
That's good. So all told, how long were you down this rabbit hole for?
Oh, I did it in spurts, watching 2 or 3 videos at a time over the last couple of days. A lot of it was just, it reminded me of some other songs that are more playlist worthy for me that I was listening on Spotify. So like it inspired me to go looking for some of those ones that were more playlist worthy so that I could tack those onto my playlist. These ones don't make it, but I enjoy the video. I would watch the video for this. I wouldn't necessarily download the song.
Fair enough.
Because there's a lot of, like, if you keep sticking down this genre and time period, again, Timbaland involved, right? Do you remember that whole Justin Timberlake album where it was like, I want to say it was called Future Sex Love Sounds?
Yep.
It had Sexy Back and a bunch of those other ones that were all there around that time. Great videos. It's a pop song. Like, I don't care for it that much. But the video was cool. And this is why much music worked in the day that it did, is that, like, look, I don't need to listen to a Justin Timberlake song, but the video was good. And I remember seeing the video because it
helped sell the song too, right? At the time.
Correct. So for me, it's like nostalgically, I can watch the video nostalgic. If you just play the song for me, I'm like, okay, it's fine. It's a song. But with the video.
And you had that show that you liked too, right? What was the show? The reaction show. What was that called?
The reaction show.
Wasn't there a show on like Much Music about watching videos and reacting to them? I thought there was.
Not really.
I thought
Well,
that was a show.
Beavis and Butthead technically had that.
Well,
I don't
fair
think
enough,
I don't
but
think
that's not. No, that's not what I'm thinking about. Let me see if I will. I will do a little bit of searching and see if I can find that. I
Yeah.
may not, but
Yeah. But I think the point that I'm trying to get at is that just think about that I've spent the last 10 minutes explaining this rabbit hole, and there's a lot of interweaving components that you can go in. That's why the rabbit holes are fun. These type of rabbit holes are enjoyable because then you can go like, okay, well, what's the offshoot of this? Because the algorithm helps you with that. Like it helps you. Oh, by the way, we got this other thing. And do you remember this person? Oh yeah. I hadn't thought about them in years, or they haven't made music in years. And you get a bunch of other stuff related to that. And it's like, oh yeah, what about this thing? What about that thing? And this song and this song and this other thing. And so there's some of them are one-hit wonders because I'm a big fan. I enjoy the one-hit wonders. But some of them are like, nope, this band produced a lot of good music back then. Now I will say, like I said, in the spirit of the hashtag we're old, unfortunately, a lot of like the really good songs there end up in a lot of these like classic early 2000s compilations. They end up a lot of that, or they've got these genres that like don't make any sense to me. Like I had fun with Spotify has a playlist called like post grunge, which I don't know what that actually means.
Yeah, fair enough.
I genuinely don't know what that means. Although the songs on it are good, but I was like, I don't know what post grunge means.
It's true.
But apparently Creed is post grunge, whatever that means.
Yeah, I don't know.
So the thing is, I was looking at it, I was like, okay, they got Seether. So I remember that one. Broken, yep. Lifehouse, Three Doors Down, yep. Sounds about right. But again, I don't know what post grunge is. Stained, Puddle of Mud, good old Nickelback, 3 Days Grace. Silverchair and Matchbox 20 that I hadn't thought about in a while. Matchbox 20, pretty good.
Oh, Carl, sorry. I just realized what I was thinking about. Okay.
What were you thinking about?
Video on Trial.
Oh, I love that show. That was a good one.
I know. So
oh my God, you made it. You made a good callback. Write that down. Episode 85. You made a good callback. Look at you.
It was bound to happen sooner or later.
Yeah, through the sheer law of averages. Yes,
exactly.
Correct. Okay, but tell me this: do you know who Stone Sour was?
No.
Stone Sour was the was kind of the side project of, I want to say, Corey Taylor. It might be somebody. It might be a different last name, but I think it was Corey Taylor, who was the lead singer of Slipknot.
Okay.
Now, do you remember Slipknot?
I do remember Slipknot, yes.
Okay, so this was his side project. Very interesting though. The one song that I know from them is Through Glass, which is a really good song actually. Fuel, Candlebox, Foo Fighters, like good stuff. Good stuff. Like I'm a big fan. Shinedown was one I had forgotten about for a while, and I was like, oh yeah, Shinedown. I remember them. Theory of a Dead Man, also known as Nickelback Light.
Yep, fair enough.
Like I just remember a lot of these bands, and I was like, oh yeah. So I was like, good times. I enjoyed myself.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff.
So that, my friends, is why sometimes it's good to indulge in the rabbit hole. Go for it. Have some fun.
Agreed.
Have some fun. So there. That is how you populate the segment of hashtag we're old. So that's this week's segment of hashtag we're old.
Nice. I love it. I love how we're just going down different ways of getting to hashtag world.
Dave, we just it's one of those things. You just have to kind of accept it.
Well, I mean, when you are old, you don't really have to do much to, it's not like we're faking it. We're old.
Yeah, well, that's the thing though. Like, look at it this way though. You have the capability now as your son grows up. There will come a day where it'll be like, oh my God, you're ancient. Like not even old, just like you're old now. By the time they're old enough to point out how old you are, then it's then can you tell us about the time that you were hanging out with Tutankhamun?
But it's always good that you have friends who are older than you. Like Carlos, you will always be older than me, so therefore you will always be more ancient than me as well.
That is true.
Even if it's only by a couple of weeks.
But the thing is, everything you said is factually correct. But as I have basically quit aging cold turkey, you will continue to look older and older as I continue to basically stay around the same.
That's fair, but I'm okay with that. I've made my peace with that long ago.
It's kind of the way it works. I've met some of the folks that I do from like high school. I saw some of them recently, like in pictures and stuff.
What?
And I'm like, I am aging so much better than all of y'all.
But you know what? Like you're familiar with the picture of Dorian Gray, right? You know that story?
No.
It's an Oscar Wilde story. But basically it's a guy, like he makes a pact with the devil basically that he doesn't age, but he has this portrait of himself in his house and the portrait ages.
Oh, right. Okay.
So I kind of feel like familiar. I feel like you made some kind of deal where You don't age, but somehow Roberto ages like double for both of you.
An acceptable sacrifice.
Right? Like I feel that's what's actually happening.
Yeah, but then they think they're like punishing me. They're like, no.
I didn't say it was unacceptable.
No, but I'm saying,
just
I'm sure like their logic at that point was like, ha ha. It was like, bruh.
You're like, I'm okay with this. Very
Yeah,
okay with this.
It's like, do I need to go back to the picture from 15 years ago? Do I look older than I now than I did then? Yeah, but do I look that much older?
No.
In the right lighting,
right?
Not so much.
You know those there's certain times where certain people you look at them at one age and you won't recognize them, right? Right? Or other people where you're like, no, they're just an older version of that person that I just saw. That's you, right? You're right. You're like, that's Carlos, only 10 years younger, right? Like that's and that's probably what they'll be saying up until well, you're probably gonna live forever too.
Oh yeah. Now immortality is a hell of a drug, Dave.
So I would never know.
I'll tell your great grandkids about it. It'll be.
I appreciate that, Carlos.
It'll be a great story. So your great grandfather was trash, just so you were clear.
Oh my!
I was like, let me tell you. Oh, trash, the worst, literally the worst. Basically, it was him and Hitler. Like basically,
okay,
like,
Carlos.
Close. Like it's real tight. It's real tight. Stalin got in there somewhere. There's just like a top 3.
Just remember, for those of you watching or listening, this is how Carlos treats his friends.
Yes.
Imagine how he treats his enemies.
Yes. Absolutely. Oh my God. The greatest joy of my life will be telling your kids how trash you are.
And also not like a peripheral friend, like one of his closest friends, right? Just so you know. Yet somehow I put up with it. Why? I don't know.
Probably Stockholm syndrome or something. I don't know what to tell you.
That's possible.
Yeah. Listen, at this point, I will quote the great philosopher King Timbaland.
You know, that's going to be another one of those sayings that basically works always.
But this is the thing. I think he was ahead of his time. Having watched some of those videos again, like literally a couple of the videos, all he does is,
I'm going to have to, now that I'm going to go, I don't know to what degree I'm going to go down this rabbit hole, Carlos.
You have to at least do a couple of these videos.
Well, I'm going to start with Morning After Dark.
Yes, do Morning
and then
and by the way, so shy. I don't know what happened to her, but not bad. Not bad. I thought her contribution was good. I was impressed. I was like, I had forgotten about it. It had been years, but I was like, hey, not bad, So Shy. Good job by you. Good job by you. Don't know what the hell happened to you, but good job by you in that video.
Well, so first of all, I'll tell you this. So Shy is indeed French.
Yeah, I thought so. Okay.
Even though her name is Deborah Sarah Epstein.
As you do.
Extremely French name.
As you do.
But there you go. The last single looks like she put out was in 2014.
Not terrible.
But she has done music as recently as 2017.
Okay.
So
it's an
according to her Wikipedia entry, the last sentence of which, so it says 2014, and then it says she's currently working on her new album as well as going back to her acting and DJing career.
Well, you can keep DJing for quite a while. As I recall, she was very young in that video.
Also, just so you know, she was born in 86.
Yeah, so.
But the best part about this is, as it goes through the details, it has like one of those boxes where it has like her birth name, born, where she got all that stuff. Mm-hmm. It says associated acts: Timbaland, Night Furtado.
Yeah, because in that video.
So there you go, Carlos.
Yeah. Oh, so that reminded me.
Also, for the record, Timbaland is now 48.
Yeah, no, like that part doesn't shock me at all.
And he's also the cousin of Pharrell.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Anyway, let's end this rabbit hole and go into some other stuff, Carlos. Can we bash on Mike Trout? And by we, I mean you bash on Mike Trout now?
Oh, I will. And I will. There's one more. I'm going to jot it down here, but this was leading me down. Oh, let me do one more thing real quick, and then we'll get into the thing.
Absolutely.
Not related directly to this, but unrelated. Still in the music genre. Still in the music genre. Not completely disconnected. One thing I'll say, because I do enjoy getting on my nostalgic rabbit holes, but that does not mean I ignore the present. As old as we are, we cannot ignore the present. We have to at least acknowledge and live in the present.
For sure.
One of the things, though, that I'm enjoying about the whole pandemic period is it has allowed me also to see how different people respond to it. And one of the ways that people respond to it is finding different avenues to be able to do some of the things they previously used to do. I talked about the music video. The music video is dead. Although I still enjoy the genre, obviously it's dead. Like it really is. It's dead.
Mhm.
But that does not mean that you cannot have a modern equivalent that touches on some of it. It won't get all the way there, but at least you can try. I'll make a recommendation for folks. One of the bands that I've paid attention to that I've caught on with, and YouTube as well. YouTube is their biggest platform, so that's not surprising that I caught on to them. I do enjoy watching bands that can do good covers. I enjoy doing checking those out. Well, one of the bands that has done a lot of covers for a lot of rock songs and things that I like is a band called Halocene. So I watched enough of them after a while, where after a bit, I decided, okay, they would mention at the end of the videos that they would do music on Twitch, so live stream music.
Mhm.
Well, as it turns out, they do basically a 3-hour concert 3 times a week
Okay.
on Twitch. And then they the way they get patronized there is obviously ads and stuff like that, but also people donate to make song requests. And they have now an extensive catalog of hundreds of songs that they've done covers for. So basically, you've got a live interactive concert because they've set up their home to be a studio where the drummer is so with COVID and everything, the drummer is actually in a physically other room doing his thing, but he's all mic'd up with a camera, and they've got a 3-camera setup and everything. Now they've got a whole production. You're getting a concert for 3 hours where the band is interacting with you in chat, and then the people can make song requests and stuff like that. And they'll also do what's called live learns, which is if it's a song that's not currently in their repertoire, but it is reasonable, they will actually try to learn. They'll take like 10 or 15 minutes to try to learn the song and try to play it for you live.
Huh.
So I like the fact that bands like that are coming up with these different ways of engaging their audience and coming up with a way of, think about it. It's basically a 3-hour concert 3 times a week.
Yeah.
So if you're a fan and you like certain songs and whatever, you can request your favorite songs and they can play that. They do have originals as well, which they do. YouTube is where they put out a lot of their stuff, but they've also done a lot of collaborations with a lot of the other musicians. So in turn, you get all these collaboration songs as well. But then now you've got a whole production. So you're just sitting there. You can literally sit back and just watch a free concert for 3 hours.
Sweet.
I think it's a good format for the bands that have figured out how to do it. I think it's interesting because that is a more modern take on the original idea of how a touring band does it, because they're all doing it from their home.
Right.
So I think it's interesting. I just wanted to bring that up at the end because, all right, we talked about the past. This is the way it used to be done, blah, blah, blah. Well, in the present, in the COVID world, bands are still doing collaborations. They're still making new music, which I think is good.
Absolutely, man.
So there you go. And I have no idea if any of my favorite bands are making new music, because God knows it's not easy to find anymore what people are doing. It's like, it's all over the place. Who knows?
Unless you're, Taylor Swift, because then the youth will tell you.
Well, as long as the youth tell us. See, why don't the youth tell me about, the next Bon Jovi album? Why don't they tell me that? I don't even listen to Bon Jovi. That's not the point. The point is, when do the youth tell me about that, Dave?
They won't, Carlos. They won't.
This is tremendously disappointing.
Don't get your hopes up.
No new Breaking Benjamin, nothing?
No.
Brutal. All right, tell us about the irrelevant division. Let's go.
All right, so we're going AL West, and Carlos, in honor of your favorite player, I decided to wear this. This is my California Angels shirt.
Brilliant.
So so my first thought when I wrote this down, because I did do some things on a piece of paper.
One of us has to. Listen, I bring the beautiful YouTube rabbit holes, the new statement on the modern state of music. Like I've carried at least 24 minutes of this podcast already. Bring it, Dave.
I'll take this.
Bring it.
So the first thought I wrote down: is it possible for an entire division to take a step back?
To relegate an entire division?
Because I kind of feel that's sort of what's happened with the AL West. And I don't really see much changing. So if you look at like a team by team basis, Oakland has gotten worse. They lost Liam Hendricks. They lost Marcus Semien. They still have Matt Chapman, so good for them. But, not a ton else. Houston has lost George Springer, although they did bring in Michael Brantley. But they still have, Alex Bregman, Jose Altuve, Carlos Correa. So they're going to still hit, although, what's his face? Verlander's out for the year again. Is Jordan Alvarez going to be any better? That's another hitter. So they've got a good offense and they've got a decent pitching time. The Angels also have a really good offense, but they need pitching, and they didn't really do much to get the pitching. Question about what Shohei Ohtani is going to be this year, because his numbers last year were garbage. Now I think he pitched like 1 1/3 inning or something in 2020, which
he's not pitching anymore. I would just assume he's not a pitcher anymore.
So supposedly he is. He also batted. I think he batted 191 last year.
Just assume he's a lower power Chris Davis.
Yeah. Okay. I'll give you that. And then, Seattle has some good young talent. They had the rookie of the year, Kyle Lewis.
They do.
But they've been 19 years straight with not being
doomed.
in the playoffs.
They're doomed. There was an entire documentary on the subject.
Literally
on the Seattle Mariners.
Which we discussed.
And it's an excellent documentary. A superb documentary.
Absolutely. So nothing in what they did this offseason, what their current roster is, or the documentary that we both watched leads me to believe that Seattle is going to be any better than they were last year. But also, they have James Paxton. So if James Paxton can pitch, woo. And then there's the Rangers, which when I was actually making the thing, it's the team I couldn't remember what other team was in this division. So that tells you all you need to know about the Rangers. And basically, can Joey Gallo hit? That's a really question. They don't really have anybody. So based on the numbers, I feel everybody's kind of meh in this. So I put down Houston, Oakland, the LA Angels, Seattle, and the Rangers. People will tell you, if you read a lot of MLB blogs or listen to pundits or whatever, that LA is going to it's a playoff team or possibly win the division. I think Houston is going to actually take a step up from where they were last year in terms of positioning, because I think they were around 500 last year. And I think they're going to win the division, mostly because everyone else around them has either gotten worse or basically stayed status quo. And because of that, I mean, you know what? Could LA maybe finish in second? Maybe, right? But I don't know. I just don't see it, right? Because I don't think the pitching's there, right? And, so I don't really think, like, anyone in this division, obviously somebody's going to make the playoffs, but I don't think anyone's going too far in the playoff, although I thought about that Houston last year, and they, went to the ALCS, so who knows?
They did that mostly out of spite, in fairness.
That's true. And part of that was, they played the, a couple of their series in Dodger Stadium, and I feel like that was one of the things that just somehow propelled them to victories that were bizarre. But yeah, like, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, in terms of, is there more of a question mark in this division in terms of potentially more interesting than the NL West? For sure, right? Because, is it any guarantee that Houston's going to run away with the division? No, I just think they're the better team top to bottom than anybody else, right? But, does anyone make me wow? And I don't think, like, same thing. It's like, yeah, Mike Trout's a great player. We'll let Carlos tell you how great or not great he is in a second. But once again, the pieces around him aren't there to make this team, special. I don't think. I could be wrong, but I don't think the pitching's there. I really don't. And because of that, I can't pick them to win the division. So again, I put Houston 1, Oakland 2, LA in 3, Seattle in 4, and the Rangers, at the bottom because, well, they're in the division, therefore they have to be at the bottom. Because, if I could put them lower, I probably would, but there's only 5 teams in the division.
Very well. So here's my analysis on the American League West. They're irrelevant. They don't matter. However,
well, you can say that about most divisions in baseball. But I think
there's some divisions that have like teams that might have a possibility of making some noise or
but just off the top of my head right now, as I'm thinking about all the other teams, this probably is the most irrelevant division in baseball.
Yes, correct. Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm leading with.
That's and yeah, I know, but I'm just saying, and by a lot. But they do have Bartolo Colon though, apparently. So
who has Bartolo Colon? Sorry,
according the Angels.
Wow. They're hoping that Bartolo can carry them. Interesting.
I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, right? Carlos, please.
Yeah. So yeah, first of all, this division's irrelevant. They don't matter. But with that said, I will say something about this division. As pertains to Seattle, they're cursed. They're doomed. Forget them. The Rangers are garbage. Forget them. Houston, will win the division, I believe, because they're the least garbage of these garbage choices and teams. Now, other than LA Angels, I forgot who the other team
Oakland
was.
A's.
Oh God, no, never mind, irrelevant.
So you're gonna put them in third then?
Sure. So here's the thing. Now, let's talk about the LA Angels because frankly, that's what everyone wants to hear me talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. This is why people tune into the AL West preview.
Okay, so here's the deal. The number one thing you need to know about the LA Angels. This is the last year of Albert Pujols' contract. Albert Pujols was an all-time great. He is a pantheon-level hitter. He is one of the greatest hitters of all time, and it will be a shame and a sad thing. Any LA Angels games that I watch will be to watch probably the last hurrah of Albert Pujols as he completes his career, his Hall of Fame career, his first ballot Hall of Fame career, which is what he deserves because he's great. And he's a real pantheon-level player. As opposed to the fake pantheon level player that I'll get to in a second. I will address the elephant in the room. But you've got a pantheon level player in Albert Pujols. You've got a second pantheon level player in Bartolo Colon because he's hilarious. He's in the pantheon of hilarity. He's in the pantheon of, goddamn, how is this man still playing professional baseball?
47 years old, man.
It's like it just continues. It goes on. And you know what? I want this train to keep rolling, Dave. As long as this train can keep rolling, let this man play as long as he can roll onto a field. And he probably will be rolling onto a field at some point. But the point is, you've got these two pantheon level players. Two. And my thought is when I think about the LA Angels, I think song by Chevelle called The Red. It has nothing to do with this team, but it's a good song. You should check out that song. It's a great song. Great song. It's very important. It's a great song. There's a little music addition into it because otherwise the rest of it is like this team's shit. Offensively, they look great on paper. It would not shock me if Mike Trout gets hurt. So now let's talk about Mike Trout, the faux GOAT level player on this team. Trash, overrated trash.
Why is he overrated and trash, Gross?
He's overrated because people think he's the best thing since sliced bread. They think he's the modern day Mickey Mantle. Well, great. The problem is he is worse in every single category other than WAR, in every single other category than Mickey Mantle at I can't remember if it was 24 or 25. In 1956, whatever age he was in 1956, Mickey Mantle won the Triple Crown. The three statistical
I will look that up as you're talking about this.
Yeah, look it up. The three statistical categories that Mickey Mantle led the league in. All of Major League Baseball in, not just the American.
You said
League.
1956, right?
1956 was
he was 24.
Okay, so at age 24, Mickey Mantle had a higher batting average than Mike Trout has ever had, more home runs than Mike Trout has ever had, and more RBIs than Mike Trout has ever had in 10 seasons. Pick his best of those three, and it's still objectively worse than Mickey Mantle's 1956 season.
That's a damn good
stop.
Full
stop.
52 home runs, 130 RBI, and a 353 batting average.
Correct. That is better than the aggregate of Mike Trout's best 3 seasons in those 3 categories. Full stop. Also, on a related note, Mickey Mantle was considered one of the best outfielders of his day, playing in center field. I would probably say Willie Mays is probably the better one. But the point is he's in the conversation with Willie Mays, who is probably one of the greatest outfielders of all time. So the point is that if that's your competition and you can at least have an argument, you at least have a case, that means you're legitimately great. Mike Trout is the best center fielder probably right now, but that's a weak position.
Okay, so just for some reference point, the most RBI he's ever had are 111 in a season. The most home runs he's ever had in a season is 45.
Which is in the year he probably would have hit 50, but he got hurt, which I'll address in a second. Please continue.
Yep. And his best batting average in his career was 326.
And I don't have it in front of me, but that's
when
he
was
in the
20.
First couple of years of his career.
When he was 20.
Yeah.
He's been basically consistently, his, did they give you an average? Yeah. His low, high 200s, low 300s. His career batting average is 304.
Yeah. And that's going to keep dropping for the record. That's going to keep dropping because he doesn't hit for a high average anymore, even though he gets a ton of walks.
He's also only 28. It feels like Mike Trout's been around forever, but
but this is the reason why people are looking at it and making these grandiose projections. But the problem is he keeps losing time to injury. And it's not going to get easier as you get older. It's the likelihood of injury will increase. And he's already a little bit semi-injury prone. He's missed some time. This season may be a little bit shortened. Last season was shortened.
I mean, granted, he obviously it's the norm now to have some days off, right?
I get it.
He's never played 162 games.
I get it. But the point is that the last full season we had, the last full major league season, he missed almost 30 games to injury.
He played 134 games that year.
Correct. The following
he's
season,
also had a 114 game season.
Yes.
And another season in the 30s.
Yeah. So stuff happens. Stuff has happened. And that's even now. But here's the key to everything I just said. The comparison he gets is to Mickey Mantle. So I'm not the one who decided to pick Mickey Mantle as the comparable here. But I want to make a point here. In 1951, in the World Series, Mickey Mantle basically got his leg caught or injured himself, whatever. It was with a storm drain because he was trying to cover the outfield to make up for Joe DiMaggio's lack of range at that stage of his career. And as a result, he destroyed his leg. He injured the leg. We don't know, given the time period, their ability to diagnose exactly what he did. But in today's world, likely it was an ACL, MCL, like it was probably a major leg injury.
Okay.
It robbed him of speed, which was one of his big things when Mickey Mantle was coming up. That's in 1951. That's at the beginning, the very outset of Mickey Mantle's career. That was his first year of professional Major League Baseball. He spent the rest of his career hobbled by that injury that plagued the remainder of his career, which was a Hall of Fame career where he was considered the best player one of the best players of the 1950s, the golden era, GOAT level player of that 50s baseball golden era. That's with a hobbled leg, which robbed him of his speed, which was one of his categories that he was. We're comparing Mike Trout, who is objectively worse than an injured, diminished Mickey Mantle. That's your GOAT of today. He's worse than the guy who was injured for his entire career and still had better statistics. Congratulations. Right. You're equivalent to a weakened, crippled Mickey Mantle. And you're worse.
So where do you rank him then? Obviously, as you said, like, okay, fine, maybe not today. Like, but here's the question, all right? And I can't answer this question because I have too much bias in this. Right? But I feel you, although some people may disagree with me, but I feel you could look at this objectively.
Sure.
Okay? Who is a better player? Right? I mean, I know obviously the stats necessarily aren't comparable, but I mean, who's a better player? Who's the best player in baseball right now? Mookie Betts or Mike Trout?
I would take Mookie Betts slightly. The thing is that here's the problem with this comparable. And this is where people will argue that I'm super biased. There's probably a bunch of players that I would take over Mike Trout. Because it's not that I don't value defense. It's that defense is relative. Now, if your defense is truly atrocious, I can't pick Juan Soto because his defense isn't that good. It's not good enough. He doesn't qualify. As a hitter, though, to me, he's vastly superior. Like, as a hitter, he's one of the elite for me.
Okay.
Right now. And the potential, to quote the great Michael Jordan, for Juan Soto, offensively, I'm making a key distinction here. Offensively, the ceiling is the roof. If you go look up that quote from Michael Jordan. The point is that he's got a very high ceiling for his offensive capability. His offensive game could be truly magical. So I would say if he is able to meet even a fraction of that potential, he'll be something special for years, which will be exciting to watch. That is why the Albert Pujols thing is such a shame, because Albert Pujols was a transcendent hitter. In his prime, he was great. But defensively, like he was nothing to write home about. He was a first baseman, first of all, and he was a good first baseman before he really started getting injured and broken down and all that. But he played first base for a reason. It's not because he was a great defender. So when you're looking at best player in baseball, you have to consider the whole
He is a
package.
2-time Gold Glove winner, though.
No, for sure. But I'm saying as a first baseman, he was more than serviceable, especially at his peak when he was more athletic and he wasn't hurt as much. He was still more than serviceable. He was solid as a first baseman. But that's why you wouldn't give him the best player in baseball. But as a hitter, he was the best hitter in baseball. For a large chunk there of the early part of his career in St. Louis, he was the best hitter in baseball, full stop, bar none. He was the best hitter. Juan Soto could be a guy like that, where he could be the best player in baseball for a decade, or best hitter in baseball for a decade.
Yeah.
Best player in baseball, though, you got to have the full package. You got to be 5 tools. Mike Trout technically is a 5-tool player. He is a 5-tool player. But here's the problem. He doesn't steal bases anymore. His average is going down. His power's still there, and I expect the power to stay. He is somewhat semi-injury prone. That's going to hurt. And as he gets potentially injured more down the road, his defense will suffer. So it's one of those things where, like, he is technically a 5-tool player, but here's the problem with Mike Trout. At his prime, when he was healthy, when he was stealing bases, when he was doing all those things, when I look at the 5 tools, traditionally, when I see a 5-tool player, I think of a Ken Griffey Jr., I think of a Willie Mays, I think of a Hank Aaron, I think of a just trying to think speed, power, defense, all of it. Those guys don't grow on trees. Like, it gets tricky.
Yeah, for sure.
Barry Bonds. Even pre-steroids, Barry Bonds had all the tools.
Okay.
All the tools. So I would say those kind of guys. But when you're looking at those guys, all of them tend to have one elite category. Like a truly elite category. Mike Trout doesn't really have that. I guess maybe power might be his elite category, but like, it's there. He's got it, but he's kind of a big dude. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, he's got elite power. I've seen better. In his prime, he had speed. I've seen better. He has good defense. I've seen better. Hit for average, seen better. The combination they're in, I've seen better. I can't go back to Willie Mays tapes. I didn't watch Willie Mays play. Barry Bonds, I saw play. Ken Griffey Jr., I saw play. Guys like that, I saw play. Now, if I take the individual categories, power, Mike Trout doesn't even register for me. Does he have power? Yeah, absolutely. He's got 50 home run power. He can be a 50 home run hitter if the situation is right.
Yeah.
A couple of caveats, though. Number 1, he got hurt that season. Number 2, the ball was juiced. The ball was super juiced. They hit more home runs that year than any other year ever. And that was the year you finally were challenging 50. Huh. Interesting. Okay. Fine. Like I said, I've seen better. And even over a 10-year span, the comparison I've given in the past is Albert Bell. Go look at Albert Bell's best 10 seasons. That dude was frightening at the plate. Truly frightening at the plate. Dominant. You compare his best 10 seasons to Mike Trout's best 10 seasons right now? Mike Trout isn't even in the conversation. As a 5-tool player, Albert Bell wasn't a 5-tool player. Let's be fair about this. He wasn't. His defense didn't hold up to that level, but he hit for average and power. He was a guy who could hit for average and power. Frank Thomas was a guy who could hit for average and power. But again, he was a first baseman. Not the same kind of thing. But those guys had consistency. They had this incredible ability to be that good year in and year out. You knew what you were getting for a decade with those guys.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what I'm getting with Mike Trout. I assume he's going to be good. But again, he's going to be good. When I look at him, I don't see greatness. I see
you don't see anything elite about him?
I don't. I struggle to it. Like I said, I think his power is elite caliber.
Even though other than last year, which we can kind of write off somewhat, and his first year, he's led in multiple offensive categories every year.
I totally understand, but like, go watch that team's so garbage. It's the opposite of like in a good team. They walk him, yeah, but they do pitch to him. Like I'll watch the at bats where he hits a home run. Like they basically fed it down the middle of the plate. It's not like he's hitting bad balls out. It's like, no, he's getting good pitches to hit. Why? Because there's nobody there. Now I think teams like don't even feel like pitching around him. They do to a certain degree, but I don't think they pitch around him as much as some of the other elite hitters that I've seen. Barry Bonds would literally go like games and get like one good pitch to hit. Trout gets tons of good pitches to hit. And when, in fairness, when he gets that good pitch to hit and he's locked in, he crushes it.
Yeah.
But like, I don't feel like Mike Trout is getting that treatment where like, oh my God, we're scared of Trout. We're winning this game anyway. This team sucks.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, pitch to him, whatever. Who cares? Take your solo home run. What are you going to do with that? Now go back to the dugout.
Well, you can't fault him for the rest of his team, though.
I totally get it. But he took big contracts. So that team is, if that team refuses to spend well above the cap, they're not doing anything. Now, Albert Pujols will be used as a scapegoat. Like, oh, well, we're paying Albert Pujols so much. You're paying Albert Pujols in the mid-20s. Come on. You're paying Trout like $34, $35 million a year. And you, Mike Trout, agreed to this. You agreed to years of this. So when Albert Pujols goes off the books and your team's still not good, then what? What's your new excuse? Because after this year, he's off the books.
Mm-hmm.
He's got one more year on that contract. This is it. This is the end. And I don't think he's getting another contract with anybody else. So I think this is the end. And after this season, what's the new excuse? Because all of a sudden, 24, 25 million have suddenly opened up. What are you going to spend it on? Who? What? You haven't been relevant in a decade. You've had a decade of baseball. You're not relevant. You've racked up empty MVPs, which, by the way, were borderline for me. You know, I could argue against all 3 MVPs. I don't think you should have any. But, fine, you got 3 MVPs. Congratulations. You're the greatest player that didn't matter in the history of baseball.
Well, I feel right now, that's hard. That part is hard to argue.
Yeah, like if you want a GOAT argument, you know what? Mike Trout, you are the GOAT, undisputed, the greatest baseball player to have absolutely no impact whatsoever on the game. None. Nothing you do matters. You strike out, doesn't matter. You hit 5 home runs, doesn't matter. You win an MVP, who cares?
Now, that could change.
Sure. The rest of the team's got to play better.
Yes, I agree with that. But I mean, again, that's not really Mike Trout's fault.
It is when you sign on for more of it. It is when you sign a contract that ensures that the ownership that doesn't feel like spending more money won't and doesn't actually address the problems. Mike Trout didn't fix the problems the Angels have. I would argue the Angels would be better if they had let Mike Trout go and signed 2 $17.5 million players. They would be a better team right now without Mike Trout.
Probably, yes. I would agree with that. He, just for the record, since we're having this conversation, he is under contract until the 2031 season.
Correct. No, that's what I mean. Like,
right?
they're
so, and he will be. It'll be his last season under contract. Currently, he's his age 38 season.
Yeah. From the Angels' perspective, it's not terrible because if the contract amounts keep going up, it'll be fine. But he doesn't change anything for them. Like, I've never at any point said he's not a good player. But the problem is that he isn't good enough to make up for deficiencies in other areas. So if that's the case, then what does it matter if he's here or not? And if that's the case, and if that statement is true, then this contract is stupid.
12-year, $426.5 million contract.
Yeah. I don't remember what the per season is, but it's pretty high.
It's, well, I'm going to say it's adjusted salary because it's, well, no, whatever. His salary is 35.45.
Yeah. So
every year now.
That's a good chunk of change. So it's one of those things where, like, again, I'm not going to give the ownership a pass on this. Like, oh, well, you spend so much money on Trout and Pujols that, you have to. No, if you want to field a competitive team, you have to get the components. If pitching is your deficiency, then maybe you should spend some. Then maybe Anthony Rendon wasn't your key component you should have been focusing on. You did that. You went to go get Anthony Rendon. You went to bolster the offense when you needed pitching. So, whose fault is that?
Yeah, no, I mean, you can't. I don't agree. I don't disagree with any of that, right? Because that's the thing. Like, even a team that potentially could spend, like the Dodgers, if you say like comparable, because they're both LA teams, even though one plays in LA and the other plays in Anaheim. Yeah, the Dodgers go into luxury tax, but they pay everybody they need to pay, right? It's not like one player is making all this crazy money and they're like, oh, we can't pay anyone else because we got this high salary. Well, you know what? If you're an Angels fan, right? I mean, what do you want, right? Do you want Mike Trout, or do you want a competitive team? Because I'm not sure the way they're spending, and I'm not sure you can have both.
Yeah. Well, that last statement is the key one. I'm not blaming Mike Trout for taking a lot of money. Mike Trout has earned the money he's gotten. Everything I've said, all my Mike Trout hate, he has earned the money he has for that franchise. For what he represents for that franchise, he has earned the money. I don't have an issue with that. But it needed to come with a caveat of like, okay, you're going to pay me this. I'll stay. We'll be together for years until basically the end of my career. But you are going to get some pitching, right? You are going to spend some additional funds to get the pitching, right? Because otherwise, what is it you would like me to do that I'm not already doing for you that is going to make a difference to help us?
Exactly.
Because he was already playing well when they signed that contract. And again, it's not that he's never played well. It's that his MVP seasons, to me, I can make a better argument for the other guy. I just don't think you should win the MVP if your team's irrelevant. If your team doesn't matter, whether you win or lose, you're not going to matter. You're not changing anything. I don't see how you can be an MVP.
Well, I think that's down to semantics of the MVP, because really the MVP in most sports every year is really MOP, right? Most outstanding player. It's not really most valuable player.
But even then, no. But that actually makes the argument worse.
Well, I don't know, because I'm not looking that in front of me. I don't have those stats of who came second, who came third. In those 3 years.
I do not think in any of those 3 years he had the dominant stats to be that far above the next guy. That's what I'll say. I've looked at all 3 of those years, and I can make a strong case for the number 2 and number 3 in a lot of those years.
All right. But I just don't know.
Yeah. And I do think that Mike Trout benefits from being the anti-Barry Bonds in the sense that the writers like him.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So it's like, if Barry Bonds had the personality of Mike Trout, he'd have had 14 MVPs. Because he at least was in that elite category consistently all the time. So, and it would have been stupid. But it's one of those things where like he won the MVP almost despite it because of statistical dominance. Now, again, it was, steroid enhanced statistical dominance, but still statistical dominance. Like you look at the comparison between him and the number 2 person, and it's like, okay, we know who we're giving the MVP to. It's not the other guy. It's this one.
Yeah. Yeah.
With Trout, it's like, well, if I scratch his name off and call him Mike Johnson, are you giving it to him? It's like, if you don't know him from Adam and you just look at the stats and look at the comparison, are you sure you're still doing it? I do think that the writers now are just doing it based on who has the highest WAR.
Yeah.
Which is, we've had the debate about the stat. And my great, incredible deference to such a wonderfully structured statistic.
Oh.
Bullshit is what it is. It's garbage. Yeah. It's trash.
Well, it's not complete trash.
It's complete trash.
I feel there is some statistical value in WAR. My issue has never been that WAR isn't a valuable statistic. My issue is that the over-reliance on WAR is very problematic in baseball.
Yeah.
Whereas, as you said, right, because then it becomes like, right, if Mike Trout this is what I would like to know, because I think I know the answer, but I don't know for sure, is that if you take Mike Trout's WAR and it was actually worse, like maybe let's say considerably worse, but the rest of his stats were the same, how much does the conversation about Mike Trout change?
Sorry, repeat the question.
So if his batting average was the same, if his or comparable, right, but he had a worse WAR.
Mm-hmm.
Now, does the conversation about him change? Is he somehow no longer regarded as great as he is regarded by most of the people in baseball?
Well, the thing is, though, we've seen that. Like he gets extra points for being a center fielder because that is a quote unquote harder position to play, which is fine. I get it. But then you've added a subjectivity to it. You've said, okay, so this position, we've deemed it to be this much harder. I'm like, okay, so you've just made up a metric. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Like, I don't doubt center field is a harder position to play than left or right field. I don't disagree with that. You probably need more range. You need to be able to kind of quarterback the outfield. I get that. But at the same time, it's an automatic. You've basically given an automatic boost because of that.
Mhm.
If Mike Trout was a first baseman, his WAR would be lower. He could do everything else exactly the same, and his WAR would be lower. What does that tell you? All I did was change his position. I didn't change the player. I changed his position. But he gets knocked down a peg because he happens to play first base or third base.
Yeah, that's BS, really.
Yeah, but that in a nutshell is the problem of WAR. It's got this element built into it. And then now you can even make it like, oh, well, offensive WAR versus fielding WAR. I'm like, oh my God. You're just making this unnecessarily complex, and you've introduced a subjective element anyway. Because the defensive ranking is based on your assessment of their defense, which means it's subjective. If I think he's doing B-level defense and you think he's doing A-level defense, we're going to end up with different WAR totals. So who's right?
Yeah.
That's a garbage statistic. It's not, as soon as you introduce subjectivity into it, we may as well do it by committee then. Because it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Like I said, people don't like those other stats, but at least when I count home runs, I know what those home runs are. When I count RBIs, I know what those RBIs are. And when I calculate average at-bats, hits divided by at-bats. Hits divided by at-bats. It's not that complex.
Yeah.
We can do it in a calculator 100 straight times. You do it, I do it, your son does it, and guess what? The number is the same. The result is the same no matter which one of us does it. That's objective. That's at least a stat we can all measure, and it gets repeated, and as long as we're doing the same calculation, we end up with the same result. It doesn't matter who does it.
Mm-hmm.
That's objective. Subjective is we all come up with 3 different versions. I decide his defense is garbage. I give him an F. His WAR is lower. You give him an A. His WAR is higher.
Yeah.
All that changed was our assessment of what we saw. That's subjective.
Yep.
That's not great.
I'm not going to argue that. I'm not going to argue it, Carlos. I'm not a WAR fan, so.
Anyway, so that's the fundamental problem. The reality is, like I said, the Angels are just an also-ran right now, as it presently stated, and it's like, whatever. My endless crusade against Mike Trout's ridiculousness will continue.
And there you have it. So basically, all that said and done, we have Houston winning the division and nothing else mattering.
Not even a little bit. Because, Dave.
The only thing that matters, Super Bowl novelty props.
Still appropriate.
Always. Also still true.
All right. You ready?
I guess so.
All right.
We talked for over an hour. Who knows how long this is going to take, but I feel this will be our last topic today.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a primer. I'm going to give an overview. And then next episode, I'll touch on a little bit more.
All right. Sounds good. Do you mind if I have some burning question, though, on what you said? May I ask?
Of course.
All right.
So the key here is that WCW's history reached an apex.
Sorry, for those of you who don't know, World Championship Wrestling.
Yes. They were the primary competitor to the WWF/WWE in the, let's say, really, because they existed prior, but let's really say the mid to the early 2000s. Because by about the early 2000s is where we'll take up the story of the decline. Really, the late 90s by that point, but whatever. There was a point in WCW's history where for over a year, I think I want to say 84 weeks or 83 weeks, thereabouts, they were getting higher ratings than WB because they were producing a more compelling show, a more interesting show, a better show. Now, in fairness, to this day, WB continues to produce a boring show, and other companies produce better shows, but that's
AEW for one.
Yeah, that's neither here nor there. But for 84 weeks or thereabouts, 83 or 84 weeks, WCW was getting higher ratings. And this was the apex, the renaissance period of professional wrestling, where the two shows were competing with each other and combined were generating almost 10 million viewers every Monday night. So you can imagine, big numbers.
Mm-hmm.
They've never come anywhere close to that. Like Monday Night Raw now is lucky to make about 2 million viewers in a night. And they're unopposed. That's an 80% decline in viewership.
Yeah.
They vaporized, never to be seen or heard from again. And that's been a testament to the product. But anyway, so at this time period, wrestling is super hot. WCW ran into a problem in that they were victims of their own success to a certain degree because they became intoxicated with it. They became so confident that they could do no wrong that they decided they were just going to do anything. They had the advantage of novelty and the advantage of having a very aggressive program of building a lot of unpredictability, which made it exciting, and also the right time, the right era. And in addition to that, they were also able to capitalize on the fact that they were willing to throw money around because they had the Turner money, the TNT money and all that. But the decline of WCW in the short version, the high level, started when they started to spread themselves out too thin. And part of that was when they decided to go to 3 hours for Nitro. They were originally a 2-hour show and it became a 3-hour show. That made it more difficult. And around the same period or a little bit after, I forget the exact timeline, they decided to create a second show. And the second show was WCW Thunder. And that was going to be, I want to say Thursday, might have been Friday. I forget. I think it was Thursday. But anyway, so they created a second show. So already they got this talent and it's been spread out and they're already spending all this money. And later on, we would come to learn that part of the issue was that Turner wanted to do this, but at the same time didn't want to spend extra money. So basically they were saying to WCW's management, Eric Bischoff and thereabouts, those folks, they were saying, like, we want to do the second show, but we're not going to give you additional budget for it. So now you're taking money out of the budget to do this second show, which may or may not, like, it's not going to increase revenues right off the bat. And the company that owns it also owns the television network. So the rights fees and stuff you get are kind of internal. It's kind of in-house. Mm-hmm. So do you get rights fees? That plays into your profitability. How does that work? So you end up with a situation where you're almost getting all this, you're even hoarding more talent to try to fill in this potential second show because a lot of the talent have these guaranteed contracts that specify they only have to work a certain number of dates. Well, if you're going to try to do a second show and you want them to be on that second show, that's another date. So if they exceed the number of dates, you have to pay them even more money. And you're already paying a lot of money. So you're creating a situation where now you've got these wrestlers that are making more money than they've ever made in their lives because of the competition. They've got these guaranteed contracts that are worth megabucks. And they barely have to show up to work. And after a while, not surprisingly, they become less motivated. They're already making a ton of money. And they'll make the ton of money, it's guaranteed. So you don't even have to be good anymore. Imagine if you were at your job, Dave, as a teacher, and you had a 15-year guaranteed contract. I'm giving an exaggerated number on the number of years. But let's say for the next 15 years, your money was guaranteed. And let's say they'll pay you $250,000 a year for the next 15 years. You don't even have to show up to class. After a while, you may not be so motivated. There may be some days where you're just not feeling it.
Yeah.
You might not give 100%. You might not try as hard. It gets difficult to focus and stay concentrated when the money's so good. Now, that's a $250,000. What if I stuck to the same scenario? What if I said, all right, you're going to get paid $1 million a year.
Yeah.
Whether you show up or not. Well, then why bother showing up, Dave?
Well, at some point, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, but it depends on any job like that, right? Like, for, some people show up because they love it, but a lot of people will be like, I'm getting paid $1 million no matter what I do. I'm just gonna sit at home and watch, YouTube videos.
Yeah, but I'm saying
Timbaland.
But I'm saying, or maybe George is getting a little older and you want to spend some time. You're doing some stuff and you got stuff at home. Megan wants you to help with something around the house. You're busy doing life stuff, but you're still getting paid the $1 million. You don't even have to show up to work.
Yeah.
Well, then what the hell? Who cares? Right? Money's still coming in. So it gets very difficult to keep people motivated. They're not as hungry. That's part of the thing. That the product suffers when that's the case. The product suffers. So that's part of it. They're doing all these things, but they're getting so drunk off the success they did have. They're like, okay, well, we're going to make it work. We're going to make it work. And they're doing all these things, hiring more talent, increasing expenses. Expenses are going up. Now, long story short, like I said, I'm giving you that primer. Long story short, this is one of the conditions. Second condition, inside of Turner, the times are changing. Ted Turner is a big fan of professional wrestling on his network. He's got a long history of it going back decades.
Mhm.
Because when Turner was developing and building into a cable conglomerate, professional wrestling was one of his staple programs that drew a rating early on in those days. So he still got a loyalty to the genre of professional wrestling because it helped him build the Superstation. TBS, the Superstation, was built on the back of professional wrestling. Okay?
Mhm.
Right around the time of the late 90s, early 2000s, there was a little event that happened. The AOL Time Warner merger.
Mhm.
The AOL Time Warner merger meant that Ted Turner was out of power. He got a ton of money, but he was no longer calling all the shots at AOL Turner.
Correct.
He was the biggest advocate for professional wrestling. His executives were not. So they said, make a second show. We're not going to give you additional budget. That's going to eat out of what you have in your coffers. So here's what happens. You don't need to be a great accountant, but let me make it simple. Expenses. Revenues.
Going up, but not nearly at the same pace.
The expenses are going up way faster than revenue. Revenues are still good. And they're still going up. But these expenses are going through the roof. Well, the folks at Ted Turner, the executives, they're bean counters. They're sitting there going like, well, you're starting to get a little bit tight on that profitability, Starting to get a little tight. You got unmotivated workers. You got chaos. You got all this stuff going on. You as the executive are also starting to suffer because now you're getting stretched. Your creative juices, which were the fuel that was making this engine go, are starting to get stretched to their limit because now you're trying to come up with 5 hours of live television every single week, plus pay-per-views once a month. And you're trying to develop all of this and you were involved in everything. And now this organization is starting to sprawl and get out of control.
Mm-hmm.
The product starts to suffer. Slowly but surely, those ratings start to come down just a little bit of time. It starts to degrade over time. WWE finally gets its house in order, starts fixing up a couple of things, starts getting they got pushed to the limit where they started to have to adjust and make those adjustments. Well, as eventually the tide started to turn, you started to do things to try to hold that stranglehold as long as you could. Increasingly, you got more desperate in the storylines you chose, how you decided to do things. You wouldn't let things sit and play out for a while. You would rush them. And then all of a sudden, okay, well, now we have resolution on that. So now we need a new thing. And now this other thing happens. So right around the late 90s, early 2000s, WCW is now starting to lose consistently to WWE. They're behind. They're trying desperately to push a rating to try to get ahead again. They're losing momentum. And now as a result, they start doing things like trading world championships over and over again. So the champion was always like the leader of the show, basically what you built the rest of the stories around. But now, this week you're world champion. This week you're world champion. This week you're world champion. This week you're world champion.
Keep switching.
You keep switching it, and you keep doing all this stuff. David Arquette was WCW champion. David Arquette.
Mm-hmm.
Why? They were cross-promoting a movie. They even came up with a match that was based on what was in the movie, a stupid-looking triple cage piece of garbage that they did as an excuse to get David Arquette the title as a cross-promotion for the stupid movie. There was a segment on, I want to say Thunder, where they were doing a cross-promotion with the Chucky movie at the time. I want to say Bride of Chucky. It might have been one of them. There was a segment where there was a wrestler in the ring. I want to say it was Arn Anderson. It might have been somebody else. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. But I remember there was a segment. No, it might have been Rick Steiner. Doesn't matter. There was a wrestler in the ring. And he was cutting a promo and doing a promo battle with Chucky on the Jumbotron. And I'm like, and I'm watching this live on Thunder. And I'm sitting like, you're fucked.
Were you at the time, were you a WCW guy or were you a WWE guy? Or did you care?
No, I was a wrestling guy. I was watching both shows. At the absolute apex, Dave. So for context, so people understand. At the absolute apex, I watched Monday Night Raw on Monday. Nitro got a replay either on Tuesday or Wednesday on TSN. One of them. There was a Thursday show. There were like 2 Thursday shows, but I think one got a replay after, maybe on Friday. And then there was Sunday Night Heat.
Yeah. So you watch Raw, SmackDown, Sunday Night Heat, and the repeats of
Raw,
WCW?
Raw, Nitro, SmackDown, Thunder, Sunday Night Heat, and ECW on TNN on Friday.
Oh, wow.
Plus Roller Jam. So I was on it, man.
Yeah.
I was on it. So everything. I was watching all the things that you could watch. But do the math real quick. I'll do it slow so you can keep up. Raw's 2 hours. Nitro's 3 hours. Thunder, SmackDown are both 2 hours. ECW is an hour. Roller Jam's an hour.
Plus Sunday Night Heat, which was
an hour.
So you're watching like 13 hours of wrestling a week.
So I'm watching all the stuff. So I know what's going on. I'm on it. That's why I joked previously, like back in the day, in that late 90s period, if podcasts had been a thing, I could have done a wrestling podcast. I was watching everything.
Yeah.
Everything that I could watch, I was watching it. And I was very aware of all the storylines and everything that was going on. I knew exactly. I was up on all the latest and greatest. I had it all. And that's why I know pretty well that time period. Some of the memories have faded because some of the stuff wasn't super memorable, but some was junk. But I remember that stupid Chucky promo.
Yeah.
It was dumb.
It's funny because, like, you know, like I watched Raw. That was the show I watched, right? When I was watching. And I watched that all the time. I didn't watch ECW. Sunday Night Heat would maybe like a hit and miss. Like it was kind of, I didn't watch it with any regularity. SmackDown was, we kind of watched, but it wasn't like, Raw was like, you watched it. SmackDown was like, if you're available and you weren't doing anything, you watched it. Right. I have no recollection of watching WCW, but I have memories of certain moments, right? Like I remember I was looking at in my wrestling rabbit hole that I've been down recently. I was looking for the Bret Hart steel plate promo.
Yes. The one where he was talking to Goldberg.
Yes. Right. And he has like the Calgary Hitman jersey on. He takes it off and he's got a Leaf jersey because he's in Toronto.
Right.
And I'm looking at him going, this is WCW.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right. And I'm thinking, I remember watching this live. Like I watched that when it happened the first time. Mm-hmm. But I was like, but I didn't watch WCW regularly. So I was like, you know, how often did I actually watch WCW? Because maybe I did watch it more regularly than I remember. I don't know. You know, obviously I know my brother was way more up on it than I was. You know, he was all about the NWO and Hollywood Hulk Hogan and stuff with WCW as well. Mm-hmm. But, you know, there's moments there where it's like, okay, yeah, like this was a big deal at the time because, you know, of how old I was and what I was doing and everything, where it was like, yeah, I watched that and, oh, that was WCW. It wasn't just WWE, right? Like there were big things that happened with WCW too.
Well, exactly. And the thing was, at the time, it made sense. It really did. It really did make sense at the time. But the end result of a lot of this stuff was that they were burning the candle at both ends really badly. The creative was starting to suffer. The wrestlers were not super motivated. You had all these things kind of working against you slowly. Mm-hmm. It wasn't fast at first. It was slow. Where the writing became on the wall was when the executives at Turner started to put the screws to it. And they started to eventually Eric Bischoff basically burned out. They kind of kicked him out for a little while and then he came back and then Vince Russo came on and they started, I'll spare you guys a lot of the gory details because it was tough to watch, but they started hot potatoing the title and started doing exactly what I just said, where they gave it to David Arquette. So basically by around 2000, WCW is slowly in a death spiral. It's not immediately obvious, but it's in a slow death spiral. Like you're watching it. The product's been degrading for some time. It's just getting progressively worse. And there are defections and people leaving the company and talent is leaving and whatever. But then the talent remains on paper still good, but they're not motivated. They're not trying super hard. They're just kind of going through the motions. Everybody's just kind of there collecting a paycheck and the product is showing. It's showing in the product. And as a viewer, now here's the great irony. In the death throes of WCW, at the tail end, when they had done everything in their power to alienate their audience and slowly kill them, they smothered them with a pillow to death. Their rating in the tail end there was higher than Raw is today. Yeah. What does that tell you? And as hard as they tried to kill their audience, they still had more people watching than watch Raw today.
And is Raw the best watched WWE show?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's the flagship show still. It's
Yeah.
the flagship show. But the reality is that the wrestling fan has lost a lot of patience. There are some folks who are diehard, ride or die. They will not leave. And then they'll recycle. They'll get some newer, some kids and stuff, but they'll grow out of it and go. The genre is still perfectly viable, but you have to produce a show that's watchable. And the audience can only take being, at the end of the day, it's an episodic show. They talk about themselves in that context. They say like, oh, we're an episodic show. You are. What happened last week, in theory, should play into what happens this week, which will play into what happens next week. Mm-hmm. And that's what, as an audience person, keeps you engaged in the product. That, oh, well, I got to watch what happens this week because then it'll lead to what happens next week.
Otherwise, it's just a match and you can take it or leave it, right?
Yeah. If stuff just happens and if it's more of a sitcom style where we reset every episode, well, then you can skip 10 in a row and come back and nothing has changed and it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
But if one thing builds off another, you can, and the way it would go is that you'd have one main storyline running and maybe a couple of smaller storylines that were starting to build and develop that might take a little while. And then the main storyline would run its course. And then one of the underneath ones would take over as the main storyline. And that's how you ran the shows for years. And that's all you had to do is make sure you had multiple threads going so that when the moment came and one ended, you had another story to take over the main slot of the show. And then these other ones could continue to build underneath until they took their turn as the main story of the show. That's storytelling. That's not that complicated. It's storytelling. Well, because the show runs basically 52 weeks a year, not shockingly, they're creatively bankrupt these days. They don't have a lot of new ideas. They've been burning the candle both ends for years. You keep bringing in more writers. Well, what difference does it make? What are they going to come up with that hasn't already done 50,000 times?
Yeah.
Like, we've done it already. That's why a lot of people are bored. Like, I've seen it. I've seen it all. There's nothing you can show me that I haven't seen.
Yeah.
So then it's about how you develop it. It's about how you present it. It's about the performance. That's all you can do is you can show a performance. AEW's one thing is not that they're coming up with incredibly new ideas that have never been done before. It's that they're presenting them well. The performers are engaged. They're interested. They're putting their best foot forward and putting on the best performance they can, which still has value. There's still some value to that. It's the same reason, using the theater analogy. Why does anybody watch Shakespeare? King Lear ends the same way every time. Well, if you like the production, if you like the way they present it, if you like the effort they put in, the way they set the stage, whatever, and you like the play, you're still going to watch the play, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's how this works. It's not that I'm showing you something you haven't seen. It's that I'm presenting it in a way where you still appreciate the way the show is being presented to you, so you still are interested in watching the show.
Yeah.
That is how this works. It is not rocket science. But if you can't do that, if it's a derivative product that is also boring, that is also uninspired in terms of performance, and you add all those three up, why would I watch this shit?
Yeah.
So ironically, the decline of WCW, to bring it all together and put a nice bow on it, was a combination of things that culminated in the executives not wanting the show on the network anyway. I'll talk about this story again another day, but Eric Bischoff had the opportunity and he actually had a deal in principle to buy WCW at the tail end with a consortium, a group that came in that was going to take over and rerun the company. They were going to reboot the company with the talent they had and come up with new shows and all kinds of ideas. But the Turner executive didn't really want wrestling on the network anymore. So they said, yeah, we'll sell you. Great. We've got a deal. Awesome. Just so you know, you're not getting the time slot. And they're like, well, without the TV time slot, what's the show worth?
What good is it?
Yeah. Like, what are we going to do? Like, we have to have TV for this show to exist.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's worthless to us.
Yep.
So in the end, Vince McMahon swooped up and bought WCW's assets for pennies on the dollar. and basically owns everything related to WCW, the name, trademarks, and brands, including a bunch of those guaranteed contracts. But a lot of those wrestlers in the end, and this will be a story for another day, they tried to do an invasion angle with WCW folks, but most of the big names were sitting there on contracts that Turner still had to keep paying them because they were guaranteed for years in some cases. And they decided they were not motivated enough to go to work anymore. They're like, well, WCW's gone. I could go to WWE, but then they have to renegotiate a contract. They don't want to pay what I'm getting paid right now. And I've got a guaranteed contract for 24 months. So how about I just sit my ass on the couch for 24 months and then we'll talk in 24 months.
Yeah.
It's a guaranteed contract. Turner has to pay me anyway. WCW or no show, you still pay me.
Yeah. I hear you.
Yeah. Today, ironically, WWE is basically running the same type of show that WCW got canceled for. They're basically doing a lot of the same mistakes that WCW did. Here's the difference. USA Network and Fox are paying them hundreds of millions of dollars a year for this garbage. So in reality, they're making a profit running a objectively worse show.
At least we have AEW that is very watchable.
But the great irony of AEW, what network is AEW on?
It's on TNT.
The same network that basically left WCW to die on the vine 20 years ago now has AEW, which is effectively the spiritual successor of WCW, if you're willing to get down to it.
Yeah.
Not like completely, but conceptually, it's kind of a spiritual successor because there are elements to it that one of the executive vice presidents, Cody Rhodes, is the son of Dusty Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes was the longtime booker of WCW back in the day.
Yeah. Okay.
Guys that are on their roster, Arn Anderson, old WCW stalwart. One of the lead commentators, Tony Schiavone, voice of WCW for years. How interesting. How interesting that a lot of the components, there's still little pieces of WCW that now, and one of the big acquisitions and one of the guys who's now prevalent in one of the storylines, Sting.
Yep.
Sting was a WCW guy.
He was like one of the WCW guys.
He was the dude. He was
right?
One of the last signature matches on the last Nitro that ever existed was Ric Flair, key WCW guy, an NWA, versus Sting.
You know, it's funny because when I think of I know there were lots of great wrestlers that wrestled in WCW and, went back. But when I think of if you ask me one person to associate with WCW, for me, it's Sting.
Yeah, because he was the quintessential WCW, NWA first, but then WCW guy. He was the franchise guy for them for many a year. And he was the guy who never left. He basically sunk with the ship. He started doing other stuff because WCW didn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
He was there until the last day. So it's one of those things where it's just, it was what it was.
Mm-hmm.
He had his cup of coffee with WWE, didn't enjoy it that much. The AEW opportunity came up, but Sting is Sting is in his mid-50s. He still has certain things he can do. And they're using him for that. So that's good. But it's like he is the quintessential WCW guy. He's one of those last ties to that thing. Ric Flair is obviously worth WWE in part because they did right by him. He likes the people there, and his daughter works for them. So like they've got, a good reason to be around. But Ric Flair was the other WCW quintessential guy who was there. But that's the thing. Like there's a little sliver.
I mean, his alligator shoes, that was WCW.
Yeah. But that was the thing. It's an
Rolex
NWA.
watch
An NWA, honestly. If you go pre-WCW, he was doing that stuff in the NWA.
All right, fair enough. But that promo that you watch is probably the one from WCW.
It might have been. It depends on the year, though. Because WCW didn't exist prior to about 1990. So if it's around 91 or 1990, it might have been still NWA.
All right.
Still same company. To be honest with you, same company, but not exactly the same. Because he was still the NWA champion at the time.
Right.
So you have to look at what belt he was holding basically while he was doing that discussion. That if it's a big gold belt, it was probably WCW. If it was the slightly smaller one, it was probably NWA. Because he kind of was champion interchangeably with the two. Another story for another day, but just Okay, so bottom line. Final nail in the coffin with it was executives basically Turner killed WCW. That was the final nail. Most of the nails were already in, but the final nail was when they basically said you couldn't have TV. And then this man swooped in and bought the assets. And then WCW was dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it ended with a simulcast. It was a simulcast where the last Nitro was airing with a simulcast with Monday Night Raw. And this was just after WrestleMania 17. Just after WrestleMania 17. I want to say 2001. That was someone can fact check me on that. I think it was 2001 was the last show just after WrestleMania 17, which I think was in April 2001. So right after that, they had that simulcast show where Vince McMahon was technically on both shows at the same time. So they did that. And they did an angle, and we can talk about this. I'll talk about this next week. They did an angle where Shane McMahon showed up at Panama City, Florida, where Monday Nitro was showing his last episode to confront Vince McMahon from Panama City because he had kayfabe in the world of professional wrestling. But WCW, leading to the invasion of WCW of WWE, which was a terrible idea. Well, actually, it was a great idea, executed horrifically, but that's a story for another day.
All right, Carlos. Thank you for that.
See, I even let a lead in.
We like it. I like it.
So that's it for us. Anything else you want to add or ask real quick?
I think that's enough, man. I think we've got some good coverage, and you got your Mike Trout hate on, so you know.
Everyone needs my Mike Trout hate. Everyone. All right, so that's it for this episode of the Unnecessary Nonsense Podcast. You can catch us on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, I believe. They might have renamed it. I forget. But wherever you get your podcasts, audio podcasts, yes, assuming I remember to upload it. Otherwise, the YouTube channel, Unnecessary Nonsense Podcast, where you will get it, for sure.
100%.
100%.
We know it's there.
Yeah. And you get images and stuff. Like, come on, man.
You can see the Martin Brodeur.
Yes. And maybe we'll put maybe I'll put random pictures of Timbaland up. He's just there going, eh. Like, you know. He's featured. And now you know about Timbaland, you know about So Shy, you know. Like, oh, for God's sake, I educate you people. Every single week. Goddamn. Man, I'm good. All right, so that's it for me and Dave. So that's episode 85, like I said, of the Unnecessary Nonsense Podcast. Check it out on those places. Wherever you can, put a comment or review, do that. If you're on the YouTube channel, subscribe. Hit the like button.
Do it.
And other things. And we will catch you next time where I may give the next story in the sorry tale of the zombie WCW. We'll see.